show.
Hi, Will. Thanks for having me on. Been looking forward to this, but also being a little bit scared because you said some of the photos are going to be a bit frightening.
You never know. I've got 10 years of footage and
Yeah,
photos of
probably
you.
more than 10 years, isn't it? More than 10 years of photos.
Probably.
Close to. Yeah.
Let's bring back the moment to this photo here. Your wearing the famous Carlson Gracie t-shirt. Can you talk about those days and what was it like training MMA when it was still considered no rules?
In the when I was training in London at the Carlson Gracie gym.
Yeah.
So that's where I did most of a lot of my MMA training back in the early days. And it was pretty interesting back then because, for one thing, the head instructor at the gym, who is a Brazilian guy called Nelson Solari, he didn't really like MMA too much. So he actually discouraged everybody from, I think there was like maybe just myself and maybe 2 or 3 other people who were like keen to fight in MMA, and he actually didn't like it at all. I'm not sure if he didn't like it, but he just thought there was no point in doing it until you're a black belt in jiu-jitsu. So he was.
And was this in the early 2000s?
Yeah, so I first started training at the Carlson Gracie gym, I think in 2000, and had done some MMA training before then as well. But I really just started doing jiu-jitsu to improve my MMA skills.
Yeah.
And so there was a big, I think some of the real Brazilian BJJ people, they sort of liked MMA, but just as they sort of saw you do jiu-jitsu, and then when you become a black belt, you have like maybe 2 MMA fights just to prove that jiu-jitsu works, but they didn't really like the idea of it as a sport in itself.
So that was the mentality back in the day.
Yeah. There was like a little bit of a conflict there, but I still, myself and a few of the others who were there, we just kept training in MMA anyway, and still doing jiu-jitsu, but there was always like a little bit of a conflict happening.
And when you came to Australia and eventually started your own MMA syllabus, how much of that training discipline did you bring over to your own style of teaching?
I think at the beginning it was a lot. It was very similar, to how we used to train back in London.
Yep.
So the club back in London was very hardcore. It was like there's a lot of, almost everybody who trained at that gym competed. So maybe there was only myself and a few others that competed in MMA, but everybody competed in jiu-jitsu. Every night when you went there, it was like pretty hardcore sparring. And even the people that didn't really compete, they were all like, doormen and security and stuff. So So it was a rough spot. And pretty much anybody that, almost all the new people who came to try out one jiu-jitsu class and never came back again. So if someone came back after the first time, we were like, that's, this guy must be serious if he's coming back again. So yeah, so that's kind of how, when we first started off Team Nemesis, I think it was kind of similar to that as well. But then over time, we had to, we sort of realized that, we can't really keep people if we keep it like this. So we changed it around a little bit.
It's funny because the way you talk about the training back in your days, it's like how I hear it as urban legends. And then when people like me and Thomas Ruderman talk about the old days, the new guys see it the same way, thinking, oh, what was it like back then? Which brings me to my next picture.
That's back in the early days. So I think that must have been pretty much right after we opened the gym.
That was a typical 4 p.m., 5 p.m. session. After you do a heavy round of S&C, you jump straight to heavy sparring, and poor Thomas would be on the receiving end of
cop a nosebleed. Yeah, somebody would be bleeding every day back in those days. So so that was kind of similar to what I was saying, to what it was like in the Carlson Gracie days in London. And I think, maybe back then as well, we were really just focused on, preparing people for MMA fights. We didn't really have, I think over the years, we sort of wanted to grow the gym and get more members and all that. Whereas back then we were a bit more single-minded and just, we just wanted to train fighters. And we imagined that, if we train fighters, then the gym will start going places.
And I felt it worked back then because I was part of that small group too that really was keen on fighting in MMA, and that was just the right time too.
Yeah. Well, I think, one thing that was different back then is I think there wasn't really, from what I remember, there wasn't really too many other MMA gyms. There was a lot of jiu-jitsu gyms and that, but there wasn't too many gyms where there was actually like coaches who were specialized in MMA or actual fighters who were competing in MMA. I think, back in those days, we were probably one of the only ones.
Yeah.
And I actually even remember like some of the coaches, they didn't even know if MMA was legal in the state or not. I remember speaking to them and they had no idea whether MMA was legal. So I think back then, we were trying to do something different. I think there was a few, coaches and fighters who had one or two fights, but they were kind of like, they weren't really training that much or they were in and out. But Andrew David was probably one of the first people that I found in Victoria that had actually like legitimately competed in MMA.
He was training out of the famous Underworld gym in the city too.
Yeah. So I've met a few people who had trained there, but I think it had already, by the time I got to Australia, I think that had already died out, and there wasn't, there didn't really seem to be much of an active MMA scene. I think there was, maybe. It was pretty big in other states, but in Victoria there was nothing. And like I'd just come from from the UK where you could fight every weekend at that stage if you wanted to. So it was pretty active over there.
I remember when I started out too, before I met the team, like you said, it was really hard to find a martial arts school. When back then you had gyms that could get away with claiming they taught mixed martial arts. But then when you went in there, they said, oh, well, we teach Kung Fu, Karate, Judo. So technically we are mixed martial arts. And I've been to a few a few Taekwondo gyms that offered MMA, but it was very, very basic, just enough to be classified as an MMA gym, and then vice versa. You go to BJJ gyms that taught MMA, but then when those guys competed, they would get smacked in the first round. And
well, that's the thing. Like I think there was a lot of places that said we do MMA because we do kickboxing on a Monday night and we do jiu-jitsu on a Tuesday night,
and that was enough.
But there wasn't that was enough, but there wasn't really many people that had actually fought or that had coached people who had fought and actually understand the differences, where it's not just combining two things together. There's like a lot more to it. So I think we're probably some of the first people that did that. Yeah, you can start. What do you want to say about this photo first?
You got to a stage where the gym was doing really well. Everyone was getting pretty well versed in each discipline. That it's a testament to your teaching style too. You were able to bring in coaches from other disciplines to broaden everyone's experience. What's it like to find coaches to learn from?
So this was like a good seminar that we did. I think this was probably one of the first ever seminars that we hosted actually at the gym.
Our good friend Tom Ruderman got us.
I think he set it up. Yeah, so this was Sean Frew who came down from Sydney. I've always been interested in learning from other coaches and other other instructors, because I think with something like, especially like MMA, there's always so much to learn. And I think I've got a decent amount of experience because I've been training for nearly 30 years or whatever, and I've also had a lot of fights and competitions. But even from my point of view, I think there's still so much more that I can learn. So pretty much every chance I get, I'm trying to learn from people. I'm like going to seminars, do PTs with other instructors, and I think from my point of view, like you can never really learn too much, and there's always, even if you sort of know. You think you know as much as you do about as much as you can about a certain technique, but after a certain amount of time, you can learn something like a small detail about it that will make you understand it so much better. So I've always been a big fan of learning from other coaches as much as I can.
They could say one little thing and that would just change your perspective. The other month I was at the Daddy Cool seminar, and just one thing he said opened up my mind. He said, when you're shadowboxing, don't just punch the air. Did you used to play games as a kid, like Super Mario?
Yeah, yeah.
You know when you're in Super Mario and then you had that little box up there that you had to jump up to break?
And then like a mushroom comes out of it or
Yeah.
something like that. Is that the one? Yeah.
Well, Daddy Cool said when you're shadowboxing, imagine you're punching that box so you have a target in mind.
Yeah.
Something as simple
Yeah.
as that I thought was
It
really
makes you,
helpful for the
yeah.
beginners. Instead of punching air, you have a focus. You're aiming for that same
For that
target every
same
time.
spot all the time.
It's
Yeah.
something nice
Well,
to
I think
visualize.
even with you know, what I found in my experience is that you say, for example, you learn something when you're a blue belt or a purple belt, and then you can learn the same thing then 8 years later, and 8 years later it makes much more sense because you weren't really, someone can give you the same information, you know, 1 year into your training, but you don't really have as much experience, and you can't really understand it because you weren't really ready for that information yet.
Yep.
But then, you know, like 10 years later you are. So it's kind of the same. If you go into like a kindergarten and you start telling those kids all about, I don't know, science and evolution, they're not really going to be ready for it. But then come back in 10 years, then, you know, some of them might be ready for it then. So I think that's the same with a lot of, I think a lot of martial arts and, you know, combat sports people get to a certain stage where they think they know it all, and then they stop learning, and then because of that they sort of stagnate, and they don't really, they die off after a while. Whereas you have to keep like a attitude where there's always more to learn.
The famous Lily Shed. Now you've been coaching
and a lot of people were hit with chairs.
Yeah, you've been coaching and cornering on a lot of local shows, grassroots shows, amateur shows, pro shows, and even the shows overseas. What's it like guiding someone for the very first fight? Because I tell people I still have as much fun working and photographing the grassroots shows as I do the pro shows. I think that's because it's the martial arts in me. I still see the fighter in me comes out when I see someone fighting for the first time. I can still relate to them as I do someone on a higher level.
Yeah, I think I think I get just as much sort of cornering people for the first fight and for their kind of early fights, providing they put in the work and they sort of stick to the game plan and all that, as I do as cornering people for the bigger shows. So yeah, I mean, especially because I think it's in some ways beginner fights are a lot more, you know, they're a lot more kind of raw and natural. It's almost more like it's you know, I think when most people start training in any kind of martial arts, what they're probably thinking about is like it's self-defense. Like, what if someone attacks me on the street? How am I going to feel? And that's really why I started training martial arts as well. So I think beginner level fights are a little bit more closer to that. Whereas once you get to, you know, the top level fights and you're doing interviews and you're taking photos and there's like media, it's really getting away from that kind of raw feeling of like a real kind of, you know, unarmed combat situation. So yeah. So I think it's good, you know, first timer fights, it's like you get a lot more, you can feel the nerves and the adrenaline a lot more.
Is there anything that you do to, or still say to first timers to calm their nerves?
I think probably one of the best things that I find to helps with beginners is to just make them aware that it's natural to feel nervous. I think a lot of beginners, they probably think, I'm going to have my fight, but I'm really scared, I'm really nervous about it, so there's something wrong with that. Whereas there isn't anything wrong with it at all. You're actually being nervous and being really scared is actually like, it's the most natural thing that you can experience. And the reason why you feel nervous like that is because your body is like going into fight or flight mode, and it's making your reactions faster, and it's making you you know, it's preparing you for a stressful situation. Whereas if you were just about to fight and you weren't nervous or you weren't feeling stressed, then there would be something wrong. So I think a lot of and I even notice that with a lot of trainers, they try to be too relaxed and try to tell their fighter, there's nothing to worry about, it's just a bit of fun or whatever. Whereas the fighter is probably secretly, shitting themselves and trying to hide it. Whereas what they should be saying is, right, you feel nervous, but it's natural. Everybody feels nervous. Once you get in there and you start throwing punches, it'll all go away.
Going back to this particular venue, it was almost
Yeah.
like the Wild West because people could fight multiple times a day. You could have shin pads or no shin pads. What are some of the signs you look for in a promotion or event to put your fighters into?
Well, pretty much with all, I mean, that event and that venue was a bit like the Wild West, but it's the same. It's the same with a lot of promotions as well. So basically, and I've had to do this quite a few times. So if we go to an event and it looks like it's not going to be safe for our fighter to, so one time we went to another, not on this show, but to another one where there was one of our teenage fighters, and he was going to get matched up with someone that they said was a teenage fighter, but when we saw them, he looked like a grown adult.
Yeah.
And then we couldn't find any paperwork for him, so we said, nah, he's not fighting that guy. So basically, I don't really believe in taking any risks for, if it's a fair fight, it's okay. But we're not going to take any risks, because ultimately my job is to look after my fighters and make sure that they're not getting hurt unnecessarily. So basically, I think not to say all promoters are shady, but it's I'll always look after my fighters first, and then look after the promoter. He's third or fourth on the list.
It's like you have a checklist that you go through to see if it's safe for your fighter and also the team.
Yeah. So making sure that, first up, we know the rules and then we know who the opponent is.
Yeah.
We know that the referee is going to, so we want to know what we're getting into. So just the same as, bringing it back to the thing about self-defense and all that, that's the way I look at it. It's not, you wouldn't take any unnecessary risks when there's, your life could be at stake.
The famous North Melbourne boxing gym. Now, this was a pretty cool event because I was asked by actually my first kickboxing coach. That was where I actually started doing Muay Thai twice a week under the BJC Academy. And that was when I met you and Phil doing late classes. I think it was 7 p.m. to 9 p.m. classes. This was when you were still renting it out here. To come back to this, to come back to this venue, I don't know, it felt like a homecoming too. Did you have any of those vibes coming back to the place where it started?
Yeah, I think so. Yeah, because I think that's the first place that we met. First place we met you. First place we probably met quite a few of the other members that have been around since then. So and I remember that the when this photo was taken, the layout of the gym was a little bit different.
Yeah.
But it all looked very familiar. And it's good to see Tim jumping in over the top ropes as well.
Yeah, that was a fun little event.
Yeah.
This was one of the first photos that one of the first times I've taken photos at the gym. I think that was when I got the nickname Chalky Bones from one of our members, because
really?
Chalky Bones was given to me because chalk's very brittle, and then everyone kept saying that my bones very, very brittle because they kept breaking. So whenever I couldn't train, I would take the camera into the class and start taking photos of training sessions. And this was one of the last training sessions for our pro fighter, Kenny Young, who was about to fight on Legends FC, which was one of the premier MMA promotions in Asia at the time. And this was back in the day when you and Phil would actually jump in and spar with the guys themselves. Do you remember much from this moment?
I don't remember much from that moment. I remember sparring with Kenny a lot to, just in general, and to get him ready for his fights. And I remember that because his eyesight was quite bad, that he would walk up and touch gloves, so he was really close to you, so you could tell where you were, and then he would start sparring from extremely close range.
Yeah.
But yeah, Kenny was probably, I think, one of our first ever members, and first people that was fighting regularly, and he's still fighting actually. He's still competing regularly now back in Hong Kong. So yeah.
And I felt back then it was a very unique connection with the coaches, because not many gyms would you see coaches jumping in and sparring with the students as well. And that was when you were still running classes, running a business, and you were still jumping in there, getting in on the action.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I've always, like, even now, sometimes I'll still do like a little bit of sparring, with the, in the Muay Thai classes and in the MMA classes.
Yeah.
But I probably don't really do it as much. But I've always, sparring has always been, my favorite thing to do in all martial arts training. And like right from the first time I ever started doing karate, and then like maybe in the first lesson they let us do some sparring, and it was that was pretty much the first time I'd ever done anything like that. So like I sort of fell in love with it right from then. And but I think the probably over the years we've gradually done less and less sparring to get people ready for fights, and now we're doing it like in a very specific way.
Yeah. And
it's actually better. Like I get more good, or in terms of how to improve the fighters, it's more beneficial if I'm actually watching them spar rather than me jumping in sparring with them myself. So that's changed around a little bit. But yeah, I still I would still be sparring all the time if I could.
I think you could.
Yeah. Yeah, well, I could, but it wouldn't be the most beneficial thing.
This was a very fun moment. Our famous fighter on the left-hand side, James Longwigan. Two of our boys fought against him. And this particular fight was actually my first time working on the Warriors weight promotion. This was when you still could have MMA fights inside the ring. So there was a mixed bag of fights. And from memory, one of our guys took this fight on last minute. And the thing with last minute fight is, unless the fighter's well trained, you can take it, and the ideal scenario is to win quickly despite taking a last minute fight. However, in this case, our fighter was unlucky and got clipped, and then the fight got stopped early on. What can you say to a fighter like that? And what's your thoughts on taking last minute fights?
Yeah, so who else? So that, I think that was when James fought Alex. Who else did he fight?
He fought our Kiwi friend, Liam. It was a Muay Thai fight.
Ah, yeah, he fought him in Muay Thai as well. Yeah, yes. Forgot about that one. Yeah. So I mean, that was I can't really remember exactly this fight. I think I just remember that Alex, got caught with like a left hook or something like that. But yeah, I don't know. Yeah, so that was probably quite a few years ago now. And yeah, like as you said, I'm not really a fan of taking short notice fights anymore. Like I think we used to do it pretty regularly. Like we just
take what you could get.
Yeah, people would be training, and then like an opportunity would come up, and we just put them in. Whereas now, with every especially since we sort of started doing the fight team program, we've been a lot more
stricter.
We've getting a lot stricter, and people have been putting in a lot more work. So it's not really. I don't really think it's beneficial to take short notice fights. I mean, like I think the only time I think it could be beneficial would be, say, if you were on the verge of getting to being signed by the UFC, and then they gave you an opportunity to take the fight, and then that would get you into it, and you were already sort of at that level, then that would be all right. But to fight on local shows at short notice, I don't really like. There's always going to be another opportunity, so you might as well do it when you're prepared, like when you've had like a proper camp to prepare for it.
And it was pretty cool because James ended up training with us afterwards, and he had a long drive too. He was traveling 3 hours back and forth to come to the gym.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Probably about 3 hours down and then 3 hours back, and then he had quite a few fights. And when was he? I think he was down for a seminar or for a competition not that long ago as well. So
okay.
Yeah, he was still keeping. I think actually maybe for our last Bushido competition, he was down for that. So yeah, and I think maybe even before that fight, I think we had trained with him a little bit as well. So
yeah,
that's the thing with especially with the MMA world. It's like it's such a small world that you end up like having to fight people that or train people that train with people that you fought against or whatever. So yeah, you end up running into the same faces again and again.
So don't burn bridges.
Yeah.
This was the walkway before the fighter enters the ring. By this stage, you know, you've done all your fight prep, you've done all the hand wrapping, you've done the warm-ups. What's it like as a coach before your fighter is about to walk out to the ring? What goes through your mind? Do you get as nervous for them?
Yeah, I mean, you always get a little bit of nerves, but sort of as I was saying before, it's like it's nothing really to be afraid of. It's just like that's getting you in the zone for, you know, there's going to be some kind of confrontation, and you're going to get fired up for it. So sometimes I think that even worse, you know, for fighters and coaches, if you're too relaxed, when you're too relaxed, it shows that you don't really understand what you're getting yourself into. So you always have to have that little bit of nerves, but you can't really show it too much as well, because then it might throw other people off the game a little bit.
Well, it's nice because usually you have a stoic face. No one can really anything from you.
No one knows. Yeah, but I mean, I think I don't know which fight this was specifically, but you know, the way that I always like to think about it is like that by the time it gets to this stage, like what we can see in the photo here, I like to think I've done everything that I can do. You know, we've done all the preparation, we've done all the training, we've like accounted for every kind of possibility, for everything that could go wrong.
Yep.
And then you feel confident. You feel confident, but you can't be too confident. You're just confident enough that you've done everything you can, but you're still ready for whatever else has to be done. So, yeah.
And this brings us to our last photo. I don't think you've seen this photo, have you?
No, I haven't seen. It looks like I've just done some serious karate training, but I don't know when this is.
So let's see. This is one of the Team Wrecking Ball photos.
Yeah, this is at our first ever gym, and it's probably actually is that the.
This was Northcote.
Okay, yeah, that's at Northcote. Yeah, so that was the first ever gym, and that must probably be not long after we opened it, because I can see that I think we rearranged it a few times after that.
This was when Phil asked me to take pictures of the new gym to promote that on social media and on the website. So when you guys first moved in, what was it like moving to your first full-time gym from the Sojai Fat days to North Melbourne to CrossFit to this facility?
Yeah, so we first moved there, up until then we had been doing just part-time session. I think like maybe doing 2 sessions a week or 2 or 3 sessions a week out of other places. And yeah, I think we always just liked the idea of having our own gym, because I think what we sort of worried about was like we would run a few classes and the numbers would get busy, or like the class would get busy, numbers would go up, but then people would drop off and they would train at other full-time gyms where they had more choice of when they could train. And then we thought, if we've got our own permanent place, then we can run classes all the time and the numbers will build up. So yeah, but I mean, at the beginning, it was, obviously with anything like this, you learn a lot over the years. So the way that if I had to start all over again, I would probably, and Phil would be the same. We would do it completely differently to how we did it in the early days, because we basically just, every class was just like fight training. Yep. And it took us a few years. And basically they'd come in, they'd do fight training, they would injure each other. Some of them would have fights and then they would come back to training again. And then the people who just wanted to train to get fit would, it would kind of be like a little bit too hard for them. So they would drop off. So it took us quite a few years to figure out the better kind of way to organize it, which is I think what we're doing now.
Well, the gym's come a great way, but those back then, like you said, those were memories that Tom and I would never give up for anything else, because you can't get that anymore.
Yeah. Well, I think as well, like I think when we opened the gym, I had just had my last MMA fight a few months before that. And I don't know if I was really, you know, maybe when I had my last fight, I was probably thinking like, I didn't really think it'd be my last fight. I'll probably have a few more after this. So I think a big part of how we were training was I was thinking like, I want a place where I'm going to be able to do my own training so that I can keep fighting. But then over time, I just sort of got more focused on training other people, and I wasn't like I sort of lost interest in actually fighting myself anymore. So yeah.
But at least you were fight ready, and you could still help out with the fight team and give them the best of you.
Yeah. And yeah, that's what I always felt like, you know, I wasn't really that interested in continuing to fight, but I still pretty much trained the same every day as if I was getting ready for a fight. So that's, and even like today, I still almost do that as well. Like I don't really see any point in you know, when people are finished fighting and they just completely give up training and they don't really do anything, or maybe they just coach but they don't really train themselves. So I've been more or less kind of sticking to the same routine throughout the whole time.
Yeah, that's perfect. Really well said. And you set a very good example for everyone to follow. Like myself, even though I'm not fighting anymore, when I'm still working behind the scenes, I still want to be in the gym and get my mind right and just feel like I'm still part of the sport. So when I'm working behind the scenes,
well, I think it's important. Yeah. And I think as well, you know, like if you, you know, I always enjoyed, I didn't really enjoy fighting that much, but I always enjoyed training. So if you enjoy something, like, you should keep doing it. There's no point stopping doing it. If you were only training because you wanted to fight and you don't really enjoy the training, and then as soon as you finish fighting, then, you know, I can see why you wouldn't want to keep training. But if you actually enjoy training, you get something out of it, then you should keep doing it as much as you can.
Well, fighting just one part of it. You know, I feel like we're both lifelong students and martial artists. That's what makes you motivated to keep training and keep learning something new every day.
Yeah, well, that's the way I look at it. I sort of think that in some ways, I don't 100% believe that every martial arts person or every coach has to fight, you know, because they don't all have to prove anything. But I think that it was definitely beneficial for me to, you know, there's probably a certain time in your life when you are able to fight, and I'm glad that I did. But it's not like that's, you know, that's just a small part of my martial arts career. And then once you finish fighting, then there's so many other things that you can, you know, there's so many. Well, I actually think that I improved more after I stopped fighting than I did while I was fighting, because when you're fighting, you focused on getting your fitness ready for the next fight, or you're pretty much refining the things that you're really good at. Whereas when you stop fighting, there's so many other skills that you didn't really put any time into, that then you've got a lot more time to like investigate after.
That's perfect. Well, thank you for coming on to the show, Denis. It's been a pleasure.
Okay, no problem. I enjoyed it.
I look forward to seeing you back after Corona.
Yeah, I look like I've got Corona in this photo. So I need a burger.